December 15, 1946, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Vincent Torino was cutting hair when the devil walked through his door. 14 years of hiding, 14 years of looking over his shoulder, 14 years of believing Al Capone would never find the barber shop on Elm Street where Vincent had built his new life. The bell above the door chimed. The bell above the door chimed. Vincent looked up in the mirror. His hands went cold around the scissors. Al Capone stood in the doorway, snow on his shoulders, that smile spreading across his face like spilled blood. "Hello, Vinny." The customer in the chair didn't know he was watching the moment that would rewrite everything the FBI had told Vincent about justice, loyalty, and the price of truth. Capone wasn't here for revenge. He was here to show Vincent something worse than death. The truth about what his testimony had really done. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The scissors trembled in Vincent's grip. 14 years of careful breathing exercises, of meditation, of telling himself he was safe. All of it crumbled in the space between one heartbeat and the next. "Just a trim today, Mr. Patterson." Vincent's voice came out steady, professional. Amazing how muscle memory worked. Even with death standing 10 feet away, his hands knew their business. Harold Patterson, the bank manager, chuckled from the barber chair, oblivious to the tension crackling through the small shop like electricity before a storm. "You know me, Vinny. Same as always. Can't have the wife thinking I'm getting too wild in my old age." Vincent's eyes stayed locked on the mirror, watching Capone shake snow from his overcoat with the casual grace of a man who owned whatever room he entered. The crime boss looked different, older, softer around the edges, but those eyes remained unchanged, dark as Chicago alleys, sharp as broken glass. "Take your time with the gentleman," Capone said, settling into the waiting chair with a contented sigh. "I'm in no hurry. Been waiting 14 years. What's another 20 minutes? The words hit Vincent like ice water in his veins. He resumed cutting Harold's hair, each snip of the scissors marking time like a countdown. In the mirror, he watched Capone pick up a magazine, Saturday Evening Post, and flip through it as if this were any ordinary Tuesday morning. Vincent's barber shop had become his sanctuary over the years. Checkerboard floor tiles, chrome fixtures, the comforting smell of bay rum and talcum powder. Framed photographs lined one wall, the 1932 Iowa Hawkeyes, President Roosevelt, a picture of Main Street from when Cedar Falls was just a farming settlement. Normal things, safe things, the kind of Americana that men like Al Capone existed to corrupt. "You hear about that weather coming in?" Harold was saying. "Radio says we might get another 6 inches tonight. Good thing Sarah's got her driving lesson canceled." Sarah Vincent's chest tightened. His adopted daughter would be home from school in 3 hours, expecting him to help with her chemistry homework, expecting the quiet normalcy that had defined their life together. She knew nothing about Chicago, nothing about the federal building testimony that had sent 23 men to prison, nothing about the cousin who'd probably died cursing Vincent's name. Weather's unpredictable, Vincent managed. Never know what might blow in from Chicago. Capone's eyes flicked up from the magazine. That smile again. The same one he'd worn in court when the judge read the sentences, the same one Vincent had seen in nightmares for over a decade. But there was something else there now, something that looked almost like pity. The bell above the door chimed again. Vincent's heart stopped, expecting federal marshals or Capone's soldiers, but it was only Mrs. Henderson from the flower shop, bundled in wool and scarves. "Morning, Vinny," she called out, then noticed Capone. "Oh, I'm sorry, didn't realize you had customers waiting. I'll come back later for Harold's usual appointment time." "No need to leave on my account, ma'am," Capone said, rising slightly from his chair in an old-world gesture of respect. "Beautiful flower arrangements you have across the street. Reminds me of my mother's garden back in Brooklyn." Mrs. Henderson beamed, charmed despite herself. Even now, even after everything, Capone could work his magic on ordinary people. It was a gift that had built an empire and destroyed countless lives. Vincent finished Harold's haircut in mechanical silence, brushing loose hair from the man's collar, accepting payment with hands that somehow didn't shake. Harold left with his usual cheerful wave. Mrs. Henderson departed with promises to return later. And suddenly the shop felt smaller, the walls closer, the winter light dimmer through the frost-edged windows. Just the two of them now. Vincent began sweeping hair from the floor, buying time, trying to think. The FBI safe house protocols ran through his mind. Emergency contacts, escape routes, the .38 revolver hidden behind the register. But what good would any of it do? If Capone wanted him dead, he'd already be dead. "You built a nice life here, Vinny." Capone's voice was conversational, almost warm. Respected member of the community. Good father to that girl. The FBI did right by you with this setup. Vincent's hands stilled on the broom handle. "What do you want, Al?" "To show you something." Capone reached into his coat. Vincent tensed, but withdrew only an manila envelope, thick with documents. "Took me a long time to get hold of these. Cost me more than money, if you catch my meaning." The envelope landed on the counter between them like a bomb waiting to explode. 14 years ago, you thought you were doing the right thing," Capone continued. "Thought you were helping justice. Thought those books you turned over were real." Vincent's world tilted sideways. "They were real. I kept them myself." "No, Vinny." Capone's smile turned sad, almost sympathetic. "You kept the ones they wanted you to keep, the ones they made sure you'd find." The broom fell from Vincent's hands, clattering against the checkerboard tiles like scattered bones. The sound seemed to echo forever in the suddenly airless shop, mixing with the whisper of wind against frost-covered windows and the distant rumble of farm trucks on Main Street. Normal sounds of his normal life, now rendered alien by 5 words that rewrote 14 years of carefully constructed reality. The ones they made sure you'd find. Vincent's legs found the barber chair behind him, Harold's warmth still lingering in the cracked leather. His hands, steady enough moments ago to trim hair with surgical precision, now trembled as they gripped the chrome armrests. The same hands that had transcribed those damning ledger entries night after night, believing he was documenting the rot at the heart of Capone's empire. The same hands that had signed his cousin Tony's death warrant with every careful notation. "That's impossible," he whispered. But even as the words left his mouth, fragments of memory began shifting like puzzle pieces, finding their proper places. Agent Morrison's too eager smile when Vincent first mentioned finding discrepancies in the gambling accounts. The convenient way certain documents had surfaced just when the FBI needed them most. The look in Tony's eyes during the trial, not just betrayal, but genuine confusion, as if he truly didn't understand what Vincent was talking about. Capone remained motionless in the waiting chair, the manila envelope between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Outside, snow began falling again, fat flakes that caught the pale December light and transformed Cedar Falls into something from a Norman Rockwell painting. Vincent had always found comfort in that snow, in the way it blanketed his new world in pristine white, covering the dark places where Chicago memories might take root. "Sarah will be home soon," Vincent said, the words tumbling out without conscious thought. "She has a chemistry test tomorrow. Molecular structures. She wants to be a doctor, you know. Pediatric oncology. Says she wants to help sick children." "I know," Capone replied gently. "Pretty girl. Smart, too. Gets good grades, volunteers at the animal shelter on weekends. Hasn't missed Sunday service at St. Mark's in 3 years." The casual recitation of Sarah's life sent ice through Vincent's veins. Of course Capone knew. Of course he'd been watching, cataloging vulnerabilities with the methodical precision of a predator. Vincent closed his eyes and saw Sarah as she'd been that first day. 11 years old, hollow-eyed, clutching a stuffed rabbit while social workers explained that her parents weren't coming back from the car accident. He'd been Vincent Torino then, recently relocated bookkeeper with a new name and a haunted past, hardly equipped to raise a traumatized child. But something in those green eyes had called to the broken places in his own soul. The FBI had encouraged the adoption, good cover they'd said, and Sarah needed a home. What they hadn't anticipated was how completely she would reshape his world, how her laughter would chase away the worst of his nightmares, how her simple trust would make him want to become the man she believed him to be. "She calls me Dad now," Vincent said, opening his eyes to meet Capone's steady gaze. "Took 2 years, but one morning she just said it. 'Dad, can you help me with my math homework?' Like it was the most natural thing in the world. And you've been a good father to her. Better than most. Have I? The question escaped before Vincent could stop it, carrying 14 years of accumulated doubt. What kind of father builds a life on a foundation of lies? What kind of man destroys his own family and calls it justice? The afternoon light was already beginning to fade, casting long shadows across the shop's familiar interior. In a few hours, Sarah would walk through that door with her backpack full of textbooks and her head full of dreams, expecting dinner and homework help and the comfortable rhythms of their shared life. She would smile at him with perfect trust, never suspecting that her father was the kind of man who betrayed blood for the promise of righteousness. Except now, if Capone was telling the truth, even that terrible certainty was crumbling. What was he if not a betrayer? What identity remained when the central tragedy of his existence proved to be built on manufactured evidence and FBI manipulation? Vincent's gaze drifted to the photograph on the wall, him and Sarah at last year's county fair, her arms wrapped around a giant stuffed panda he'd won at the ring toss, both of them grinning at the camera with chocolate smears on their faces. It had been a perfect day, unmarked by shadows from his past. Looking at it now, he wondered if any moment of peace was real or simply borrowed against a debt that would eventually come due. The manila envelope waited, patient as a loaded gun. Whatever truth lay inside those documents would shatter the last illusions of his carefully constructed world. But Sarah would still come home expecting her father to be there, whole and dependable in hers. Vincent reached for the envelope with hands that felt like they belonged to someone else entirely. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, as if the weight of truth itself had settled into the manila paper. Vincent's fingers traced the metal clasp, hesitating at the threshold of a revelation he both craved and feared. Across from him, Capone watched with the patience of a man who had learned to measure time in decades rather than moments. "Before I open this," Vincent said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to know something. If what you're saying is true, if the FBI used me, then Tony—" "Your cousin died in Stateville 3 years ago," Capone finished quietly. "Pneumonia, officially. But men don't usually get pneumonia from a broken heart." The words hit Vincent like physical blows. Tony had been more than family. He'd been Vincent's closest friend since childhood, the brother he'd never had. They'd grown up on the same Chicago block, attended the same parish school, shared dreams of escaping the neighborhood's grinding poverty. When Vincent had taken the bookkeeping job with Capone's organization, Tony had warned him to stay clean, to keep his head down and his hands out of the till. "Whatever you see, whatever you learn, remember, family is all we got in this world, Vinny. Don't let them turn you against your own blood." Vincent pulled out the first document with trembling fingers. It was a carbon copy of an FBI internal memo dated 3 months before Vincent had discovered the first damning ledger entries. Agent Morrison's typewriter had produced neat bureaucratic sentences that reduced human lives to operational objectives. Subject: Operation Bloodline. Phase 2, Implementation. Classification: Confidential. Asset Vincent Torino. Bookkeeper placement. Asset has demonstrated sufficient motivation and moral flexibility for Phase 2 manipulation. Psychological profile indicates strong guilt response and desire for redemption following father's gambling debts. Recommend proceeding with planted evidence strategy. Asset's emotional attachment to family members makes him vulnerable to control through manufactured moral crisis. The document slipped from Vincent's numb fingers, drifting to the checkerboard floor like a falling leaf. He stared at the clinical language that had mapped out his destruction with surgical precision. Asset. Manipulation. Moral flexibility. They had dissected his soul and found the exact pressure points needed to make him dance to their choreography. "Keep reading," Capone said gently. "It gets worse." The next document was a series of handwritten notes in Morrison's familiar script, detailing the careful construction of false evidence. How they'd intercepted real ledger books and replaced key pages with forgeries. How they'd staged the discovery of hidden documents in places where Vincent would inevitably find them. How they'd fed him just enough genuine information to make the lies believable. Subject discovered planted materials in office, safe as predicted. Emotional response exceeded expectations. Actual tears during debriefing. Believes he's uncovering vast conspiracy. Recommend increasing pressure by introducing family photographs to evidence room. Subject's protective instincts toward cousin Antonio should provide necessary motivation for full cooperation. Vincent's vision blurred. He remembered that day with sickening clarity now, finding Tony's photograph among the evidence, seeing his cousin's laughing face attached to documents that painted him as a cold-blooded enforcer. The FBI had shown him more photos. Tony allegedly collecting protection money, Tony supposedly threatening shopkeepers, Tony's signature on orders for violence that had never happened. He'd believed every lie because they'd known exactly how to sell it to him. They'd understood that Vincent's love for his cousin would make him desperate to save Tony from himself, would make him willing to betray the entire organization if it meant pulling one good man back from the precipice. Except Tony had never been on any precipice. He'd been exactly what he'd always claimed to be, a small-time numbers runner who kept his nose clean and sent money home to his mother every week. The bell above the door chimed suddenly, making Vincent jump. Sarah's voice called out across the shop, bright and cheerful and completely ignorant of the catastrophe unfolding in her father's world. "Dad? You here?" "School got out early because of the snow." Her footsteps echoed on the tiles as she moved toward the back of the shop. "Mrs. Patterson said you might need help with—" Oh, she stopped short, taking in the scene, Vincent pale and shaking in the barber chair, documents scattered around him like accusatory ghosts, and Capone rising smoothly from his seat with that politician's smile that could charm angels or devils with equal ease. "Sorry, Dad. Didn't realize you had a customer." Vincent's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. How could he explain that this wasn't a customer but a reckoning? How could he tell this innocent girl that everything she'd believed about her father was crumbling like sand castles at high tide? Capone stepped forward, extending his hand with old-world courtesy. "Al Capone, miss. Pleasure to meet you." Sarah's eyes widened slightly. Even in Iowa, that name carried weight. But she recovered quickly, accepting the handshake with the polite grace Vincent had taught her. "Sarah Patterson. Nice to meet you too, Mr. Capone." The sound of his false surname on her lips hit Vincent like a physical blow. Even her name was a lie now, stolen from the identity they'd constructed to hide him from consequences that had been manufactured from the beginning. Capone released Sarah's hand with theatrical gentleness, and Vincent watched his daughter's face for any flicker of recognition, any instinctive fear that might save them both. Instead, she smiled, that open, trusting expression that had been Vincent's greatest joy and deepest terror for 7 years. "I should let you finish your appointment," Sarah said, already turning toward the door. "I'll just be upstairs doing homework if you need me, Dad." "Sarah, wait!" Vincent's voice cracked like a teenager's. He half rose from the barber chair, documents crackling beneath his feet, but what could he say? "Don't go upstairs alone because this man might have people watching the building. Pack a bag because we might need to run again. Everything you know about your life is about to change?" She paused, concern flickering across her features. "You okay? You look kind of pale." "Just tired, sweetheart. Long day." The endearment felt like glass in his throat. How many long days had he spent protecting her from the truth about who he was? How many bedtime stories and parent-teacher conferences and birthday parties had been contaminated by his lies? Sarah nodded, accepting the explanation with the easy faith of someone who'd never had reason to doubt him. Her footsteps echoed up the narrow staircase that led to their apartment above the shop, each step driving Vincent deeper into panic. Once she was gone, the silence stretched like a held breath. "She seems like a good kid," Capone observed, settling back into his chair as if they'd been discussing the weather. "Don't." Vincent's hands clenched into fists. "Don't you dare talk about her. Whatever this is about, whatever you want from me, she stays out of it. Vinny." Capone's tone carried a strange gentleness. "I'm not here to hurt that girl. Hell, I'm not here to hurt you." "Then what?" The bell chimed again. Vincent's heart hammered as Mrs. Chen from the laundromat pushed through the door, bringing a swirl of snow and the scent of starch and detergent. She moved like someone carrying urgent news, her usual unhurried pace replaced by nervous energy. "Vincent." she said, then stopped short when she noticed Capone. Her face went carefully blank, the expression of someone who'd grown up in a place where recognizing a wrong face could be fatal. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize you were busy." "It's fine, Mrs. Chen. What's wrong?" She glanced between Vincent and Capone, clearly weighing her words. There were men asking questions today. About you, about Sarah. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. They had badges, but something felt wrong. The way they smiled. Vincent's blood turned to ice water. Federal agents didn't ask questions like that unless something had gone catastrophically wrong with his protection status. Unless someone had decided that Vincent Patterson's usefulness had expired. "What kind of questions?" he managed. "About your routine. What time Sarah gets home from school. Whether you have family elsewhere." Mrs. Chen's eyes kept darting to Capone, recognition and fear warring in her expression. "I told them nothing, but others might not be so careful. Mrs. Henderson loves to talk, and Harold—" She didn't need to finish. Harold would cheerfully tell federal agents everything he knew about Vincent's life, complete with amusing anecdotes and detailed scheduling information. The man had no concept of secrets. Capone stood slowly, and Mrs. Chen stepped back as if he were a dangerous animal. "Ma'am," he said with surprising courtesy, "you might want to close your shop early today. Take a little vacation, maybe visit relatives out of town." "I don't understand." "You will." Capone's smile was gentle and terrible. "And when you do, you'll be grateful you listened." Mrs. Chen fled without another word, leaving the scent of snow and terror in her wake. Vincent watched through the frost-covered window as she hurried across the street, her small figure disappearing into the gray afternoon like a ghost. "They're coming for me," Vincent said. It wasn't a question. "FBI's cleaning house," Capone confirmed. 14 years is a long time to keep secrets. Lot of people have died who knew about Operation Bloodline. Lot of convenient accidents and sudden heart attacks. He gestured toward the scattered documents. "I wasn't the only one they framed, Vinny. You were just one tool in a much bigger game." Upstairs, Sarah's radio crackled to life. Some cheerful pop song that belonged to a world where fathers didn't destroy innocent men and federal agents didn't orchestrate mass murder. Vincent could hear her moving around, probably changing out of her school clothes, trusting that her normal life would still be there when she finished her chemistry homework. "How long do we have?" Vincent asked. "Maybe an hour, maybe less." Vincent looked around his shop, the chrome fixtures that caught afternoon light like small suns, the photographs of local heroes and harmless history, the cash register that had never held more than a few $100s. 7 years of careful normalcy about to be swept away like everything else he'd ever tried to build. "She doesn't know how to run," he whispered. "Then you better teach her fast." Vincent stared at the staircase where Sarah had disappeared, his mind reeling with the impossibility of what lay ahead. How do you teach someone to run when they've never known they needed to hide? How do you explain 14 years of lies in the space of an hour? "I need to see the rest," he said, reaching for the remaining documents with hands that no longer felt like his own. The next page was a photograph, grainy, black and white, but unmistakably real. It showed Agent Morrison shaking hands with a man Vincent didn't recognize, both of them standing beside what looked like a warehouse. The timestamp read 3 weeks before Vincent's first discovery of evidence against Tony, but it was the handwritten note clipped to the photograph that made Vincent's world tilt sideways. Payment confirmed, $50,000 per conviction. Additional $25,000 bonus for family member testimony. Morrison guarantees minimum 12 prosecutions from Torino Asset Cooperation. Recommend immediate liquidation of asset following trial conclusion. The paper slipped from Vincent's nerveless fingers. They had put a price on his betrayal, calculated his cousin's life in dollars and cents. Worse, they had planned to kill him the moment his usefulness expired. Only some bureaucratic oversight or change in agency priorities had kept him breathing these 14 years. "My God," Vincent whispered. "Tony died thinking He never stopped believing in you," Capone interrupted quietly. "Even after the conviction, even in prison. He used to tell anyone who'd listen that his cousin Vinny was good people, that there had to be an explanation." Capone's voice carried an unexpected weight of sorrow. broke my heart, if I'm being honest, watching a good man defend the person who'd destroyed him." The words hit Vincent like physical blows. All these years he'd tormented himself with the image of Tony's hatred, convinced that his cousin had died cursing his name. To learn that Tony had defended him, had maintained faith in Vincent's character even while rotting in a cell because of Vincent's testimony, it was almost too much to bear. Upstairs, Sarah's footsteps moved across the floor in the familiar pattern of after-school routine, backpack by the desk, shoes in the closet, textbooks arranged for evening study. Normal sounds of a normal life that would end the moment Vincent told her the truth. "There's more," Capone said, producing another folder. "You might want to sit down." Vincent was already sitting, but he gripped the chair arms as Capone opened the folder to reveal a series of surveillance photographs. The first showed Vincent himself, but younger, standing outside a Chicago courthouse with Agent Morrison. Vincent remembered the day, just after his testimony, when Morrison had assured him that justice had been served. The second photograph showed the same courthouse steps, but from a different angle. In the background, barely visible, stood a familiar figure, Vincent's father, the man who had supposedly died of a heart attack 2 years before Vincent ever met Al Capone. "Dad?" Vincent's voice came out as a strangled whisper. "Very much alive when you testified," Capone confirmed. "In fact, he was working with the FBI the whole time. Those gambling debts you thought drove him to his grave? Fabricated. That heart attack? Theater. He's been living in Miami under federal protection since 1931. The revelation hit Vincent like a physical blow. His father, the man whose death had driven Vincent to seek legitimate work, whose memory had haunted every decision Vincent made, had been alive all these years, had been part of the conspiracy that destroyed Tony, that destroyed Vincent's entire understanding of himself. "He knows about Sarah," Vincent said, the pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. "He knows where we are. The FBI's been tracking you through him this whole time. Every Christmas card you never sent, every birthday you mourned alone, he's been filing reports." Vincent Patterson's emotional state, his effectiveness as a cover identity, his attachments and vulnerabilities. Above them, Sarah's radio changed stations, settling on a news program. Vincent could hear the announcer's voice discussing weather patterns and local politics, the mundane concerns of people whose lives weren't built on foundations of lies and betrayal. "Why?" Vincent's voice cracked. "Why keep me alive all this time if they plan to liquidate me?" "You had a daughter," Capone said simply. "Made you more convincing as Vincent Patterson, family man and small-town barber. But Sarah's 17 now, about to graduate high school. Once she's gone, college, her own life, you become a liability again." The truth hit Vincent with crushing finality. Sarah hadn't just been his salvation, she'd been his shield. The FBI had let him live because a man with a daughter to protect was more believable in his role, more committed to maintaining his cover. But once she left for college, once Vincent was alone again, there would be no reason to keep him breathing. Footsteps echoed on the staircase. Sarah's voice called down cheerfully, "Dad, I'm making hot chocolate. Want some?" Vincent looked at the scattered evidence of his destroyed life, at the man who'd once been his enemy and was now his only hope of survival, at the shop that had been his sanctuary and was now his trap. "Coming, sweetheart," he called back, his voice somehow steady despite the earthquake in his chest. In 30 minutes, he would have to teach her how to run from the only life she'd ever known. Capone's eyes tracked the sound of Sarah's footsteps moving across the apartment floor above them. "She doesn't know any of it, does she? About Chicago, about who you really are?" "Nothing." Vincent's voice was barely a whisper. "She thinks her mother died in a car accident when she was 10. She thinks Vincent Patterson has always been her father. The lie tasted like poison now. I found her at a group home in Des Moines. The caseworker said her real parents were killed in a drug deal gone wrong. I thought I was saving her from that life." "You were," Capone said quietly. "But now you need to save her from this one." Vincent reached for the last document in Capone's folder, his hands trembling. This one was different. Newer paper, recent dates. A federal memorandum marked urgent and dated just 3 days ago. Operation Bloodline. Final phase. Authorization granted for termination of remaining assets. Asset Vincent Torino and dependent Sarah Patterson to be eliminated before Christmas break. Staged break-in recommended to maintain cover of random violence. Bodies should be discovered no earlier than December 26 to avoid holiday complications. Vincent's vision tunneled. They had scheduled his daughter's murder like a dental appointment, timed it to avoid inconvenience to federal employees' holiday plans. Sarah, innocent, trusting Sarah who made him hot chocolate and worried when he looked pale, was classified as a dependent to be eliminated. The arrogance, Vincent breathed, staring at the clinical language. They think we're just paperwork. Capone leaned forward, something dangerous flickering in his eyes. That's where they're wrong, Vinny. They think because they made us into victims, we stayed victims. They think because they wrote our stories, they know how they end. The sound of Sarah humming drifted down from upstairs, some song from the radio, cheerful and oblivious. Vincent had heard her hum that same tune yesterday morning while making breakfast, both of them still living in the illusion that their biggest worry was her upcoming chemistry exam. "My father," Vincent said suddenly, the betrayal hitting him fresh. "All this time, I thought I was honoring his memory by going straight. Every decision I made, every sacrifice, I thought I was making him proud. His laugh was bitter as broken glass. He was filing reports on me, on Sarah." "There's something else about your father," Capone said, producing one final photograph. "Something the FBI didn't plan on you finding out." The image showed Vincent's father shaking hands with Agent Morrison outside a bank in Miami, but it was the background that made Vincent's blood freeze. Standing behind them, partially obscured but unmistakably present, was Tony, Vincent's cousin, who had supposedly died in federal prison 3 years ago. "That's impossible," Vincent whispered. "Tony died of pneumonia. I read the death certificate." "You read a forgery." Capone's voice carried grim satisfaction. "Tony's been in protective custody since 1939. Same deal they gave you, different city. They needed his death to keep you compliant. Couldn't risk you learning he'd figured out the frame-up and was talking to journalists." The barbershop spun around Vincent like a carousel. Everything he'd believed, every guilt that had driven him, every nightmare that had haunted his sleep, all of it built on lies, stacked on lies, stacked on lies. Tony was alive. His father was alive. And Vincent had spent 14 years mourning both of them while they lived under federal protection, probably reading reports about his psychological deterioration like it was entertainment. "Why are you telling me this?" Vincent's voice cracked. "Why now?" "Because I need you angry instead of guilty," Capone replied. "Guilt makes you weak, makes you accept what they've done as somehow deserved. But anger makes you fight back." Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. Sarah's voice called down, "Dad? The hot chocolate's ready. It's getting cold." "Coming," Vincent called back, but he remained frozen in the chair, staring at the evidence of his father's ultimate betrayal. The man who had raised him, who had taught him right from wrong, who had supposedly died believing in Vincent's goodness. That man had sold him to federal handlers like livestock. "There's no witness protection for us now," Capone continued. "No negotiating with the FBI, no cutting new deals. They want us dead, and they want it clean. But they made one mistake." His smile was sharp as a razor. "They assumed we'd stay divided. Your father, Tony, you, all kept separate, all believing different versions of the same lie." Vincent looked up sharply. "You've been in contact with Tony?" "For 6 months now, ever since I got out and started putting pieces together." Capone leaned forward conspirationally. "He's got quite a story to tell about federal corruption. Quite a few names and dates. Turns out a wrongfully imprisoned man has a lot of time to investigate the people who put him away." Above them, Sarah's footsteps approached the staircase again. Vincent had perhaps 5 minutes before she came looking for him, 5 minutes before he had to explain why their world was ending. But for the first time in 14 years, Vincent felt something other than guilt burning in his chest. The FBI had taken everything from him, his identity, his family, his peace. They had turned him into a weapon against innocent people, and then planned to discard him like garbage. Now it was his turn to make them pay. "Dad?" Sarah's voice carried a note of concern now. "The marshmallows are melting." Vincent closed his eyes. listening to his daughter's footsteps pause at the top of the stairs. In 30 seconds, she would come down to check on him. She would see Capone sitting in the barber chair, see the scattered documents, see her father's face white with shock and rage, and then Vincent would have to find words for the impossible, that everything she'd known about her life was a carefully constructed lie, and that lie was about to get them both killed. "I need to know the plan," Vincent said quietly, gathering the photographs with steady hands. The anger was spreading through him like fire, burning away 14 years of carefully maintained guilt. "How do we survive this?" Capone pulled a folded map from his coat pocket. "Tony's in Albuquerque. Safe house, but not FBI, private arrangement. He's got documentation ready for all three of us. New identities, clean backgrounds, money to disappear properly this time." Vincent studied the map, noting the route marked in red ink. "That's 1,000 miles. They'll have roadblocks, alerts." "Not if they think we're dead." Capone's smile was sharp as winter wind. "Your shop has a gas line running through the basement, doesn't it? Old building like this, probably not up to current safety codes. Terrible accident waiting to happen." The implication hit Vincent like ice water. You want to burn it down, with our bodies supposedly inside. "Dental records can be faked if you know the right people. And I know the right people." Capone tapped the map. "FBI finds charred remains in the basement, case closed. Meanwhile, we're 3 states away and getting farther." Footsteps on the stairs. Sarah was coming down, her humming replaced by worried silence. Vincent could picture her expression, the slight frown she got when something felt wrong, the way she chewed her lower lip when puzzling through a problem. In 10 seconds, she would see her world ending. "She won't understand," Vincent whispered. "She's never had to run from anything worse than a pop quiz." "Then you better make her understand fast," Capone replied, standing as Sarah's shadow appeared on the stairwell wall. "Because understanding is the difference between living and dying tonight." Sarah rounded the corner carrying 2 steaming mugs, her school clothes replaced by comfortable jeans and the red sweater Vincent had bought her for her 16th birthday. She looked so young, so normal, so utterly unprepared for what was about to crash into her life like a runaway train. "Dad, you look terrible," she said, setting the mugs on the counter. Her eyes moved to Capone, taking in his expensive coat and calculating stare. "Is everything okay?" Vincent met his daughter's concerned gaze and felt something break inside him. All these years of protecting her innocence, of building walls between her and the violence that had shaped his life, all of it about to crumble in the space of a single conversation. "Sarah," he said, his voice surprisingly steady, "I need you to listen very carefully to what I'm about to tell you. And then I need you to pack everything you can carry in 10 minutes." Her face went pale. "What's wrong? Are you sick? Is it—" "My name isn't Vincent Patterson," he said, each word feeling like a small death. "It's Vincent Torino. I testified against organized crime figures in Chicago 14 years ago, and the federal government has been hunting me ever since. We have to leave Cedar Falls tonight, and we can never come back." The hot chocolate slipped from Sarah's nerveless fingers, shattering against the floor in an explosion of ceramic and steam. The sweet smell of chocolate mixed with the bitter scent of fear as she stared at him with the expression of someone watching their entire reality collapse. "That's not true," she whispered. "Dad, that's not funny." Vincent pulled out the federal memorandum with their names marked for termination, holding it where she could see the official letterhead. "They plan to kill us both before Christmas. Tonight, probably. This man," he gestured to Capone, "he's here to help us disappear." Sarah's legs buckled. She caught herself against the counter, her face cycling through disbelief, terror, and something that might have been betrayal. "Everything you told me about my mother, about how we met—" "Lies," Vincent said, the word cutting him like a blade. "All of it. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I'm so goddamn sorry." The shop fell silent except for the wind rattling the windows and the distant sound of Mrs. Chen locking up across the street, already heeding Capone's warning. Sarah stood frozen in the spreading puddle of hot chocolate, staring at the federal death warrant that bore her name, and Vincent watched 17 years of careful fatherhood crumble into dust. Outside, Headlights swept across the frost-covered windows as a car turned onto Main Street, moving too slowly for the weather conditions. "They're here," Capone said quietly. The headlights crawled past the shop once, then twice, before stopping 3 doors down at Hanson's Hardware. Vincent watched through the frost-etched window as 2 figures emerged from a dark sedan, too well-dressed for Cedar Falls, moving with the practiced efficiency of federal agents who'd done this dance many times before. "Sarah." Vincent's voice cut through her shock like a blade. "Upstairs. Now. Pack only what you can carry in one bag." She remained frozen, staring at the federal death warrant. "This has my name on it." "My name, Dad. How do they even—" "Because they've been watching us for years." Vincent grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Every report card, every school play, every time you got sick, they've been filing reports. You were never my daughter to them. You were leverage." The words hit her like a physical blow. Sarah's face crumpled, 17 years of trust and love warring with the impossible reality staring back at her from official letterhead. "The Christmas presents you said were from your work friends. FBI monitoring gifts. Proof. I was maintaining my cover identity." Vincent's voice broke. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Every day I've been your father, every moment we've shared, that was real. That was the only real thing in this whole goddamn lie." Across the street, Mrs. Chen's porch light flickered off. The agents would notice the darkness, would read it as Capone's warning taking hold. They had maybe 3 minutes before someone decided to move ahead of schedule. "I can't." Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "I can't just leave. My friends, my graduation, college applications will mean nothing if you're dead." Capone's voice carried quiet authority. "Vincent, we need to move. They're conducting surveillance sweeps." Sarah whirled on him, her shock transmuting into rage. "Don't you talk to me. Don't you dare talk to me like you know what I'm losing." "I know exactly what you're losing," Capone replied calmly. "I lost everything too when the federal government decided I was expendable. The difference is, you still have a chance to build something new." Vincent saw the moment Sarah's world truly collapsed. Not just the revelation about their identity, but the understanding that this had always been temporary. Every birthday, every bedtime story, every quiet moment of father-daughter love had been borrowed time, stolen from a federal government that considered them both disposable assets. "My whole life," she whispered, "has been a lie." "No." Vincent stepped closer, glass crunching under his feet. "Your life has been you. Smart, brave, kind. That's not an identity anyone can fake. That's not something the FBI created or can destroy." Through the window, Vincent watched one agent speak into a radio while the other examined the alley behind the barbershop. They were positioning for a standard termination. Front and back exits covered, witnesses warned away, evidence prepared for post-incident staging. "They'll make it look like a robbery," Vincent said, the tactical reality crystallizing. "Father and daughter killed by drifters passing through town. No one will question it. No one will investigate." Sarah looked between Vincent and Capone, her young mind struggling to process the scope of the betrayal. "My adoption papers? Forged. Your real parents died in Kansas City. I found you through an FBI contact who specialized in placing assets with convincing cover families." Vincent forced himself to meet her eyes. "But Sarah, from the moment I held you, from the first time you called me Dad, that wasn't cover. That wasn't an assignment. That was love." The radio chatter outside grew more urgent. Vincent caught fragments through the wind, subjects potentially aware, modified timeline, authorization confirmed. "Basement access is through the storage room," Capone said, producing a small device from his pocket. "Gas leak will be detected in approximately 20 minutes. Long enough for us to reach the river, not long enough for anyone to respond." Sarah stared at the device. "You're going to blow up our home." "To save your life," Vincent said. "Sarah, in 30 seconds, I'm going upstairs to grab the emergency bag. You can come with us and live, or you can stay here and die believing in a version of reality that was designed to control us both." She looked around the barber shop, at the chair where she'd done homework after school, at the mirror where Vincent had taught her to cut hair, at the counter where she'd served hot chocolate to customers on cold mornings. Everything familiar, everything safe, everything about to become ash and memory. The agents outside separated, one moving toward the front entrance while the other disappeared around back. "They're coming," Capone warned. Sarah wiped tears from her face with the back of her hand, her expression hardening into something Vincent had never seen before. Not his innocent daughter anymore, but someone who'd just learned that innocence was a luxury neither of them could afford. 20 seconds to decide, Vincent said, heading for the stairs. "Choose life, sweetheart. Choose us." Sarah looked once more at the federal death warrant bearing her name, then followed him toward the only future they had left. The explosion came at 11:47 p.m., shattering windows 3 blocks away and sending flames into the December sky like angry prayers. By the time the Cedar Falls Volunteer Fire Department arrived, Vincent Patterson's barber shop was nothing but twisted metal and ash. The basement where 2 bodies had allegedly perished, now a crater of blackened concrete and melted pipe. Vincent watched the fire from half a mile away, Sarah pressed against his side in the cab of Capone's stolen pickup truck. She hadn't spoken since they'd crawled through the storm drain behind the shop, hadn't made a sound as they'd listened to the agents breaking down the front door just as the gas ignited. Now she stared at the orange glow consuming everything she'd ever known, her face illuminated by destruction. "They'll find dental records in the debris," Capone said quietly, eyes on the road ahead. 2 sets. Father and daughter died of smoke inhalation before the flames reached them. Tragic accident caused by aging infrastructure. Sarah finally spoke, her voice hollow as winter wind. "Whose teeth?" "People who died alone," Vincent answered. "People whose deaths wouldn't be questioned." He didn't tell her about the morgue attendant in Chicago who owed Capone favors, didn't explain the careful preparation that had gone into their resurrection. Some details weren't meant for 17-year-old ears, even ones that had aged years in a single night. 3 hours later, they sat in an all-night diner outside Davenport, nursing coffee that tasted like burned regret. Sarah had finally stopped crying, but her eyes remained fixed on nothing, processing a world where everything solid had become quicksand. Vincent recognized the expression. He'd worn it himself 14 years ago, when the FBI had first explained that Vincent Torino was dead and Vincent Patterson was about to be born. "Your real name," she said suddenly. "Torino. Is that Italian?" "Sicilian." Vincent stirred sugar into coffee he couldn't taste. "My grandfather came through Ellis Island in 1891. Built a grocery store on the south side, raised 5 sons who all went into different kinds of business. The kind of business that gets you killed. The kind that gets you betrayed by your own government." He met her eyes across the cracked Formica table. "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Everything I taught you about right and wrong, about standing up for people who can't protect themselves, that came from my grandfather, not from some FBI handbook." She nodded slowly, processing this fragment of authentic history in a life built on fabrication. "And my real parents? The ones who died in Kansas City?" Vincent exchanged a glance with Capone, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since they'd left the flames behind. This was the conversation Vincent had dreaded most, the final thread connecting Sarah to any sense of legitimate identity. "Car accident," Capone said gently. "No other family. You were 3 years old, placed in state custody." He pulled a worn photograph from his wallet, sliding it across the table. "I knew your father. Good man. Would have been proud of who you became." Sarah studied the picture, a young couple standing beside a modest house, the woman holding a toddler with Sarah's distinctive green eyes. Real people, real lives, really gone. Not FBI constructions or convenient fictions, but actual loss that had created the space for Vincent's love to take root. "They look happy," she whispered. "They were." Capone's voice carried unexpected tenderness. "And they loved you completely in the time they had." The diner's television flickered in the corner, volume low but closed captions scrolling across the bottom of the screen. Vincent caught fragments of the late-night news. Fatal explosion. Barbershop owner, no survivors. Their obituary reduced to 30 seconds of local tragedy, already forgotten by the time the weather report began. "So what happens now?" Sarah asked, still holding the photograph. "We drive to Albuquerque and pretend to be different people?" We drive to Albuquerque and become who we actually are, Vincent corrected. No more federal handlers, no more fabricated histories. Just us, figuring out how to live honestly for the first time in either of our lives. Sarah looked up from the photograph, studying her father's face in the harsh diner lighting. You're different already, calmer somehow. Vincent realized she was right. The crushing weight of guilt that had haunted him for 14 years was gone, replaced by something cleaner. Grief for the innocent people he'd unknowingly betrayed, but no longer the paralyzing shame of believing himself a traitor. The truth had been devastating, but it had also been liberating. Guilt is heavy, he said simply. Anger burns cleaner. Outside, snow had begun falling again, coating their stolen truck and the empty highway beyond. Somewhere ahead lay Tony, alive, waiting, carrying his own collection of federal sins and survival stories. Somewhere behind lay the ashes of Vincent Patterson and his daughter, 2 more casualties in a war most people never knew was being fought. Sarah folded the photograph carefully, slipping it into her jacket pocket next to the fake identification Capone had prepared. I think I'd like to learn Italian, she said quietly. If we're going to be Torinos, I should probably know what that means. Vincent smiled, the first genuine smile he'd managed since Capone had walked through his door. It means we belong to each other, he said. Everything else we'll figure out as we go.